John Nowatzki, NDSU Extension Ag and Biosystems Engineering Department, but my role is an extension specialist working with precision agriculture. I'd like to share with you our work with weed identification and herbicide resistance. We've been fortunate to receive a USDA ARS grant, 5-year grant, about $850,000 annually, to focus on 2 areas, and one of those areas really is on weed identification and weed management, weed control. The objective really looks at 2 things. One is weed identification in fields, and so we'll use any available data, basically to develop spectral signatures in the greenhouse and then out in the field for the most significant weeds that crop farmers have to deal with in North Dakota. And then, in addition to identifying those weeds, we will work with producers to map weed in fields and prepare maps so that sprayers can be turned on where there's weeds and turned off where there are no weeds. So we see that as something that producers are interested in. They've done an excellent job in weed control for the last 50 years. And so a lot of areas on fields when they're out there spraying are actually weed free, but we want to work with them so that those sprayers can be turned on and off effectively and accurately where there's weeds and where there's no weeds. And in the case of herbicide resistant weeds, that's another area that is really significant. If you ask crop producers in the northern plains, what's the big issue for them, without a doubt they're going to talk about herbicide resistant weeds. And some have, like Palmer amaranth, have received a lot of publicity for the intensity and the problems how they disrupt crop production. But our producers they'll list a lot of different weeds that they see as resistant. And so our objective is to focus in 2 areas on identifying herbicide resistant weeds. One is using thermal imagery after herbicides are applied to pick out those weeds that are not dying, that are resistant, and map those very accurately. And then the other one is, again, we're finding the work that we've done so far that herbicide resistant weeds in a single species, the resistant and the susceptible, have actually in some cases different spectral signatures, so you can identify them before herbicide is applied as well. And so we're, again, as I indicated, preparing maps, but we're also working with small companies that have developed autonomous UAV sprayers or drone sprayers, a very common practice in other parts of the world, but just being developed here. We have 2 different companies that will be, one that we've already purchased a sprayer, and the other one that will collaborate with us this summer. But again, the objective is to map those areas where there's individual or small groups of small patches of weeds, put that into as a shapefile or as a map, then send the autonomous sprayer out just to those areas and come back. So we see that as an actual use of small autonomous UAV sprayers, even in large fields where we wouldn't be applying herbicides to the whole field, but just to small areas. So that kind of summarizes what we're doing with weeds. I guess we could focus on one additional area related to that. We have one research scientist who is working with a graduate student to develop a robotic weed control tool that would actually recognize weeds and then just either physically remove them, but more likely apply a herbicide.